Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Mem Gimel in Shevuot. So we just finished the Mishnah yesterday, and so we're at the Gemara, and we'll pick up with that in just a moment. But let me share my screen, and we will get started. So yesterday we concluded with the Mishnah on Membet and Mebet. The Mishnah noted that one does not swear, whether for a partial admission in response to a single witness or in connection with a custodian that loses an item, when it comes to slaves, documents, land, and hektish. So 4 different items are mentioned. Additionally, these 4 items are not subject to double payment if you're a thief that gets caught with them, or 4 times or 5 times if it's a sheep or cattle that you slaughter or sell. And the Gemara now picks up by addressing the source for the double and 4 and 5 time payments not applying to those who steal these items. So let's take a look. So Tashlume Kefil Minalan. How do I know that in fact the twofold payment, the double payment for somebody who steals something is not going to be required if the item is a slave, land, documents, or hektish? So the Tan Rabbanan al kol davar pesha kalal. Again, this is pasuk is in Shmot kaf bet pasuk chet, and the previous verse is talking about this double payment, and it says in the following verse that what does that payment apply to? It applies to al kol davar pesha, all kinds of liability. That's a klal. Al shor, al chamor, al seh, al salma. That's an ox, a donkey, a sheep, or a garment. That's prat. That's a specification. Those are specific items. Al kol aveda, for any lost thing. So again, that would all get covered. So chazar v'klal. So as a result, we apply again that it a klal. So klal prato klal, using that principle of klal prato klal. What does that teach us? Iata dan elkeina prat, as we say every morning in Rabbi Yishmael's statements. So what we'll do is we'll learn from it more generally from the items that are in the prat. So mahaprat meforish davar hamitalto v'gufa mamon. So each of the items that we just mentioned, the ox, the donkey, the sheep, and the garment, they are all movable property that have intrinsic value in themselves, meaning their value is not derived from some attribution that we give to it, but rather it in and of itself has value. So as a result, av kol davar hamitalto v'gufo mamon. So too, anything that is movable and has intrinsic value. Yatsu karkos, that comes to exclude a land, she'ein metaltalin. After all, that's not movable. Yatsu avadim shehukshu karkos, and slaves are excluded because they are connected. They are compared to land. They are, considered like land. And yatsu shtaros, and it also includes contracts or documents. Sha'af al pi shehem metaltalin, they are certainly movable, but ein gufan mamon, their value is not based on the value of the paper. Their value is based on what's written on the paper and the meaning that we give to that writing. So therefore, it doesn't have true intrinsic value. Hektish, and similarly, when it comes to consecrated property. Now, consecrated property, it can be movable and it can have intrinsic value. But what did the pasuk say? The pasuk says, Re'euksiv. It's not clear in the words that we quoted, but the pasuk says, Al kol davar pesha, al shor, al chamor, al seh, al salma, al kol aveda asher yomar ki hu zeh, ad ha'elokim yavo, ad ha'elohim yavo davar shnehem. So the matter should go to the court, to the judges. Asher yashion aleihem yishalem shnehem shnayim lire'ehu, to his friend. And so the re'ehu is only applicable to an individual Jew. It does not apply to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple. And so as a result, we've now proven that the four rules, the four items don't have the rule of doubling. So v'lo arba v'chamisha. Similarly, they're not going to be subject to exclude the parenthetical. They're similarly not going to be subject to the 4 times and 5 times. That's what our Mishnah said. My time is the Gemara's question now, and the Gemara answers Tashlumi arba v'chamisha amar Rachmana, because the Torah says 4 times and 5 times payment, and that includes one of those times is due to the fact that all theft is covered by the double payment. And so we just said that the double payment doesn't apply. So I would think that, so the result would be that you would end up with 3 or 4 times payment, but the Torah never refers to 3 times and 4 times payment. And so as a result, that it doesn't make any sense to say that that's going to be subject to the 4 time and 5 time payment, because again, it would not end up being 4 and 5 because you take away one of the times because of the no double payment. And so as a result, you'd end up with 3 and 4, and the Torah never mentions 3 and 4. And so as a result, that's why we're going to end up saying that it just means that it doesn't apply at all. As Rashi says, v'lo tashlumi, last Rashi on Membet Amabet, v'lo tashlumi shlosha v'arba, v'kevan to kafal, Leka, since there is no doubling, Havalahu Shlosha Varba. You remove that count, and now you end up with 3 or 4. So that was point number 2 from our Mishnah. Now, our Mishnah continued and said that an unpaid watcher would not need to swear for slaves, documents, land, or hektish. So the Gemara asked for the source of that. Again, going through each of these last items in our Mishnah to say what the basis is. Shomer Chinam Eino Nishpa. How do I know this? Well, we have a brisa as we turn to Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. Ki yitain ish el re'ehu, when a person gives to his friend klal. It's a general statement. It could be anything that is given to his friend. This pasuk is Shmot Kaf Bet pasuk Vav. And then it continues. Kesef o kelim, money or utensils. Well, that's prat. That's a specific item. Lishmor, to watching generally could be to anything. So chazar v'klal, that's another generalization. So klal prat uklal, so yatadan elikein prat. So when you have such a situation, you focus just on similar items that are similar to the specific items that were listed. So ma prat meforish davar hamital to mammon. So just as we say that those items, kalim and kesef, are movable items and with intrinsic value, so too, anything that's movable and has intrinsic value. So yatsu karkos she'ein metaltalin, that excludes land which isn't movable. Yatsu avadim shehukshu lekarkos, it excludes slaves because they're connected to land exegetically, meaning that from a drasha. Yatsu shtaros, and it excludes contracts, documents, sha'af al pisha metaltalin, yes, they're movable, ein gufan mammon, they don't have any intrinsic value. And hektish, again, rei ehu ksiv. Here we actually did reference the rei ehu in the words that we quoted, because it says ki yitain ish el rei ehu. So again, same basic drasha. So no se sachar einu mishalom. How do we know that a paid custodian also doesn't pay? So again, same basic situation. So minalan, how do we know that? The Tanurabanan, because again, we have another brisa, and the brisa is so similar to the brisa that we just cited that we aren't even going to quote the whole thing. Ki yitain ish el re'ehu, klal, chamor, oshor, oseh, prat, v'kol behema, lishmor, chazar uklal. And so we have again a klal prat uklal, the specification being a donkey or a sheep or an ox or a sheep. So klal, and so as a result, chulu ad hektish. So then it just says ... in the Gemara effectively, and so we continue until hektish, meaning the same basic principle applied. We don't apply it to land because it's not movable. We don't apply it to and again, first of all, the first 3, the items that are mentioned, donkey, sheep, and ox, are all movable and have intrinsic value. And so as a result, we're going to say that just as though you have intrinsic value and are movable, so too everything, it only applies to intrinsic value and movable things, which excludes land, which isn't movable, slaves that are compared to land, documents, because although they're movable, they have no intrinsic value. And again, when it comes to hektish, again, it said kiyitin ish el rei ehu, the friend. And again, if I didn't say where this pasuk was from, this is pasuk kafbet, parak kafbet, pasuk tet in Shemot. And so as a result, rei ehu implies that it only applies to other people and not to the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, so that is our derivation of various rules that were mentioned in our Mishnah. The Mishnah then also had a machlokes between Rebbe Meir and the Chachamim about whether grape-laden vines are considered connected to the ground to exempt them from a vow of partial admission. So the Gemara now discusses why the Mishnah specifically chose the case of grape-laden vines, meaning if what we're talking about is that items that are connected to the ground are not treated like the ground, well, the vines themselves are connected to the ground and not treated. So maybe they're not treated like ground. So you know, and so why did we specifically mention grape-laden vines? So Rabbi Meir Omer yesh dvarim shehein kakarka ve'ein kakarka. There are some things that are treated like land that are not like land. Miklal to Rebbe Meir savar kol hamachuber lekarka eino kakarka. It would appear that Rebbe Meir says that anything that's attached to the land is not like land, meaning even the vines. But but then when we look at the Mishnah, it specifically says that they're teunos, the grapevines, meaning that they have grapes on them. They're holding things. Let him argue. With the Chachamim about empty vines. So Amar Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Chanina. No, when we say that they're grape-laden vines, it's not just that they have grapes on them, but they're in the early stages of growth. No, they're ready to be picked. The Rabbi Meir Savar Kivitsuros Damyan. Rabbi Meir says that when you have grapes that are ready to be picked, it's as if they are already picked, and therefore it's as if they're not attached to the ground. The Rabbanan Savre Lo Kivitsuros Damyan. And the rabbis say, no, we're not going to make that comparison. We're not going to say that those two are the same thing. And so as a result, that's why our Mishnah specifically mentioned it, because Rebbe Meir does not believe that everything that is attached to the ground should be treated like it's detached from the ground. It's only things that you're going to and are about to detach from the ground that should be treated like they're detached from the ground when it comes to the oaths of a watcher or moda b'miktsas. Now, Tosos points out from here, hey, maybe we should say that, one second, according to Rebbe Meir, if everything that's attached to the ground and ready to be picked, it's as if it was already picked. Well, then all of a sudden, the prohibition on Shabbat of cutting things from the ground, like picking an apple or cutting a flower, maybe those prohibitions don't apply according to Rebbe Meir. But Tosos basically doesn't even get to that as a question. If we take a look at the second Tosos on Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, Kivitzuros Damyan, Nira de Inyan Shabbos L'Kuli Alma Lav Kivitzuros Damyan. When it comes to Shabbos, everybody agrees that these grapes would not be considered as if they were already picked. The Kemichuborot Damu, and rather they're considered attached to the ground. To Gamar Mekatsiris Samanin, because we learn the concept of having to pick things that is prohibited on Shabbos from the picking of the spices and the dyes, the inputs for the of various items for the Beis Hamikdash. And of course, those things that would be picked for the Beis Hamikdash's usage would be already ready to be picked. And so clearly picking something that's already ready to be picked is considered picking it out of the ground and not as if it's already detached. Now, that's on the one hand. So on the one hand, when it comes to Shabbos, we are not going to say that kol ha'omdim lihibatzer kibitzuros damyan, that something that's ready to be picked, it's as if they are already picked. But we also have the opposite direction. Villa inyan balchov, when it comes to somebody who owes money. If I owe Stan, $100, and I have a field that is worth $100, and it has on it grapes that are ready to be picked, and Stan is going to collect against my field. Kavan delot srichi la'ara, since those grapes no longer need the ground, l'kuliyama kivtzuros damyan. He doesn't get the grapes with my field. It's ready to be picked. That's all. It's as if he gets just the land. He's not going to get the grapes also. And so as a result, I will get to keep the grapes that are on the land that when he's collecting it from a debt. So that's the, whether that debt was against me or that's against somebody that I bought the land from and predated my purchase. Bottom line is that he does not get to the creditor does not get to also take the ready to be picked produce. So we see essentially that there are three levels of positions. There are some topics for which we will say that it's that everybody agrees that it's as if it's already something that's ready to be picked. It's as if it's already picked, like in the case of a balchov, somebody who owes money. There are some cases where everybody agrees that we'll treat it as if it's not ready, meaning, and we'll treat it as if it's attached to the ground, like on Shabbos. And then there's a middle category, which is the case that we're dealing with, where you're talking about oaths, where we're going to say that there's a machlokas. Rabbi Meir says that we'll treat it as if it's detached, and the Chachamim say, no, we're going to treat it as if it's still attached. Okay, so now our Mishnah concluded by noting that only measurable things with their weight or or count, or measurable or measurements can be subject to a partial admission. So the Gemara now qualifies the ruling that that claiming a full house and responding that this is what you gave me is not a partial admission that triggers an oath. So again, our Mishnah said that if you tell me, hey, I gave you a full house, and I say, listen, I don't know what you call a full house, but whatever you gave me, I've given back to you. So that is not a partial admission. So we're now going to try and understand that, or specifically, Abaye is going to qualify that, or try to qualify it, and then Rava is going to disagree. So ein nishban ella al davar shemida v'shem mishkal. As the Mishnah said, you can only be caused to swear if the thing that's being claimed and the thing that's being denied is subject to measure, weight, and count. Although the Gemara doesn't quote the word minyan, but it's also shiva minyan. So Amar Abaye lo shanu ela de Amar le bayistam. So this teaching only applies when the person says, I'm giving you a full house. Aval Amar le bayis zemale. But if I say I'm giving you this house that's full, so then this house is a specific house, and the house, it has a full measurement. So Yedia Tante. So it seems like that claim is known, and so as a result, we know that when as Rashi says Yedia Tante, third line down on Mem Gimel Amud Aleph in the narrow lines of Rashi, the Yedia Tante the Kevan de Amar Le Bayit Male, that since the claimant said that he gave him this full house, and when the returning happened, it has something missing. Nira chasrona. We can look at what's missing. Ba'arehu, and it's just like kizeh omer ad hachalon v'zeh omer ad aziz. Like the defendant says that it was only filled to the window, and the other one says it was filled to the ceiling beams. So as a result, that's a measurement that we can measure. And so as a result, we should say that when you say this house, it's just like it was measured. So Amarle Rava is not sure about that. He thinks otherwise. Ihachi Adatani Seva, what about the end of our Mishnah? Zeh Omer ad Haziz, V'zeh Omer ad Hachalon, right? When we have one saying up to the beam and the other one saying to the window, Chayav, that you're liable. If what you're saying is true, Abaye, Liflug v'litne b'dida, you should have taught in that same case. Namely, Bamed Dvarim Amurim, one is it that we say that saying a full house and saying that I gave you what you gave me is not going to be a moda b'mikzas, b'vayas malay. That's where you say just the words a full house and you don't say this full house. Aval b'bayas zeh malay chayab. But if you said this full house, well, then you'd be liable. Why didn't we say that? Meaning the Mishnah should have taught us Abaye's lesson if Abaye's lesson is accurate. So Ella Amar Rava, and so as a result, Rava disagrees with Abaye, and La'olam Eino Chayev. No, you are not liable, even if you say Bayit Zeh, because Ad Sheyita Enenu B'davar Shebamida V'Shemishko V'Sheminyan. You have to specify something that is with a measurement, a weight, or a number. V'yodelo b'davar shebamida v'shemishko v'sheminyan. And you have to respond with a item that is subject to measurement, weighting, or counting. And Tosos here asks an interesting question. So Ella Amar Rava, so it's the third to last Tosos on the page. V'im tomar v'amai lo chashiv bayit zeh malay davar shebamida. Why don't we include? Why don't we consider a full house something that is measurable? The kavan to amrle bayit zeh malay. That this person says he gave it to him full and he gave back to him something that was missing. Nearest chasrona, we can see what's missing. And it's just like the case of saying this one said it was up to the ceiling beam and the other one says it's only up to the window. So two potential answers. V'yesh lomar de b'she'ein chasira elama'at. The situation is where there's only missing a little bit. And so the problem is that when you are missing a little bit, that might have been something that was called a full house. And so the problem is that if we say something that is where you use an imprecise measurement, well then makri malay, and yet it's still considered malayah, it's still considered full. So ve'ein yadua ma beinehem, and so as a result, we can't tell what the difference is between the two. So what Tosfos' first answer is highlighting that actually bayit zeh malay, that this full house in and of itself is not truly a fully measured amount, and there because people will call something full even at different levels. I might call something, it's literally the glass is a version of the glass is half full kind of discussion, meaning I could call a glass full if it's all the way up to the top, but many people would call the glass full if it's up to the near top, just so that you don't spill it. Meaning if I ask for a full glass, people don't give it all the way to the rim in general, because otherwise people are going to spill all the time. So that's answer number one. Inami, answer number two, be'inan sheyazkir mida behodaso. No, you're absolutely right. According to the second answer, maybe we could say that a full house, it does constitute an accurate measurement. But the problem is that the response didn't include any aspect of measurement, because the response was, whatever you gave me, that's what I gave you back. And so as a result, there was no measurement. And what did Rava specifically said? You need both sheyita enenu b'davar shebamida shemishko v'shminyan v'yodelo b'davar shebamida v'shmishko v'shminyan. And so as a result, here we don't have the latter, because the person never said exactly what was given. He didn't say it was up to the window. If he said, maybe according to the second answer, if he said it was only up to the window, so then that would be a moda b'mikzas, because clearly up to the window is not considered full. So that would be, so that's the story. So interesting debate within Tosfos as to sort of the key element that sort of Tosfos is highlighting is when we say precise measurement, do we mean sort of the way ordinarily people talk, or do we mean like an exact measurement? Because if we use ordinary talking as a measurement, so then a full house will be a good measurement. And so the problem with this is the second answer is the fact that the person came back and said, I gave you what you gave me. So that's not a measurement. Everybody can agree to that. And if, on the other hand, we say, no, you need to give a precise measurement, so that's the Tosfos' first answer, that you actually have that a full house is not a precise measurement, because a lot of people will consider a house full, even if there is some air that is left in the house. Okay, so now we're going to say that Rava's position is supported by a brisa. Tanya Kavase de Rava. We got a brisa that supports Rava. You've got a core of a grain that's in your possession that belongs to me. Vahala Omer ein lecha biyadi. No, you don't have anything that I'm not holding anything of yours. Patur. Well, that's a complete denial. So of course there's no moda b'miktzas there. So you're not going to be required to swear. Menorah gdola yeshli biyadcha. I gave you a big candlestick. Ein lecha biyadi ela menorah katana. No, you didn't give me a big candlestick. You gave me a small candlestick. That is patur, because the thing that you're claiming, a big candlestick, is completely different from a small candlestick. It's a different item. You can't, as we're going to see, you can't turn a big candlestick into a small candlestick. So that doesn't work. Azora gedola yeshli biyadcha. I gave you a big belt. Ein lecha biyadi ela azora katana. No, you gave me a small belt. Again, patur. That is going to be exempt. Aval Amarlo, on the other hand, now we're going to deal with situations that are moda b'miktzas. Kor tuah yesh lecha biyadcha. I gave you a core. Hala Omer ein lecha biyadi ela lesech. No, you gave me only a lesech. I don't have that much. So that's chayav, because that's a partial admission. Menorah bas eser litrin yesh biyadcha. I gave you a 10 litra weight candlestick. Ein lecha biyadi ela bas chamesh litrin. And no, you gave me a 5 litra weight candlestick. Chayav. There you are going to be liable. And we're going to discuss the reason why in just a moment. Klala shel davar. What's the general rule? La'olam einu chayav ad sheyita anenu b'davar shebemida v'shemishkal v'shebeminion v'yodela b'davar shebemida v'shemishkal v'shebeminion. Again, just as Rava said, and exactly proving Rava's point, that you have to use a measure, weight, or number, both in the claim and in the response. Klalo shel davar la'asuye mai. And what is it why do we specifically reference that there's a general rule? Doesn't it come to include in the exclusion that this particular house, meaning that if you say this house full of produce, you're not going to be liable to an oath? Exactly. And so as a result, clearly the brisa supports Rava. Umay shna menorah gedolo menorah katana. Well, 1 second. Let's take a look at this brisa. You said that if you say a large candlestick and you come back and claim a large candlestick and you defend, no, it was just a small candlestick, that they're considered different. So what's the difference between the two? Mashatano lo hodolo. What he claimed was not admitted. Umasha hodolo lo tanu. And what was admitted was not claimed. Well, ihachi bas eser bas chamesh nami. Well, then what's the difference between claiming a 10 litra candlestick, that's big, and responding a 5 litra candlestick, which is small? Masha anu lo hodolo over masha hodolo lo tanu. What was claimed was not admitted to, and what was admitted to was not claimed. So Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak. So we're going to offer 2 potential answers to this question, and reject the first one and stay with the second. So let's take a look. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak, Rav Yitzchak says the first answer. We're dealing with a menorah that's in sections. So to come modale mine. And so as a result, he's admitting some of the sections. So the point is that what the claimant is saying, there were 10 sections, each weighing a litra on this menorah, and you responded by saying, no, there are 5 sections. So that is mode of mixus. But 1 second, ihachi azora nami nisni. Well, then why not teach a similar principle with respect to the belt? Because apparently the belts, it was essentially one size fits all, because what you would do is if you needed a bigger belt, you would just add on and connect, stitch together another piece. And let's say that we're dealing with a belt composed of several pieces stitched together. And so as a result, why not say that our Mishnah, or I mean, this Brisa is talking about such a belt, and therefore that a partial admission of the small belt is in the large belt is is teaching us the same concept, and therefore why would we say that we're that in that if you admit to a small belt, you're not actually being modeh b'miktzas. Ella delaife lokatani. It must be that we're not connecting two things together. We're not dealing with a stitched together belt. And hakinami b'shel chulios lokatani. And so similarly, we must not be talking about a menorah that has different pieces. So Ella, as a result, we offer a second answer. Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Bar Mamel. Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel offers shiny menorah. The menorah is different. Because what can you do to a gold menorah that you have? You can shave off some of the gold, and so as a result, this is what a brilliant move one can have. You borrow 10 litra candlesticks, and you give back 5 litra candlesticks, because what you do is you take off a little bit of gold here and there throughout the entire candlestick, and now all of a sudden you've made yourself a decent pile of gold. So bottom line is that's going to be considered modeh b'miktzas, because so as a result, the person who says that I admit that you gave me a 5 litra candlestick will have to swear that in fact that was all that was given and nothing more. Okay, so that brings us to the next Mishnah, which continues with laws relating to partial admission. But now we're going to deal with a situation where collateral was given by the borrower and lost by the lender. So hamalva eschaveru al hamashkon, if you lend to your friend based on collateral of it hamashkon, and now you lose the collateral. Amar lo, so the lender says, Sela hivisicha lalav. It was, he tells the lender tells the borrower, listen, I lent you a sela on this collateral. The shekel hayashava, but the collateral was only worth a shekel. A shekel is half a sela, so you owe me a shekel. V'hala omer, no, lo, ki ela sela helvisani alav. You lent the sela hayashava. Yeah, you lent me a sela, but I gave you collateral that was worth a sela. So I owe you nothing because you lost my collateral. So patur, in that situation, that is not a modeh b'miktzas. That is a full denial, and therefore you're exempt. Let's deal with a second case. Sela hilvisicha alav. Again, there are 4 possibilities. We'll see that there are effectively 4 possibilities. Whether if the collateral could be less than the value, or it could be more than the value, and it can be alleged in both directions. So, and in each case, it could be actually equal to the value. So let's take a look. Sela hilvisicha alav v'shekel hayashaveh. So I lent you a sela, and you gave me a shekel value of collateral. V'hala omer lo ki ela sela hilvisani alav ushloshim dinarim hayashaveh. And you gave me 3 dinar. Now a dinar, each dinar is half a shekel. So as a result, you say that I owe you a shekel, and then I say no, I only owe you a dinar. So chayav, that's a situation that is a modeh b'miktzas, because you said that I owed you a shekel, and I say no, I only owe you a dinar. So case number 3, now where we turn to the collateral being worth more than the loan. And so as a result, the loss of the collateral actually turns the borrower into a lender and the lender into a borrower. Sela hilvisani alav. So I say you lent me a sela, shtayim hayashava, and it was worth so again, now the borrower is going to the seller, to the lender, and saying, listen, you lent me a sela, ushtayim hayashava, but and I gave you collateral that was worth two sela. V'hala omer lo kiela sela havisani alav v'sela hayashava. And but the lender goes back and says, no, you gave yes, I lent you a sela, but when you gave me, and yes, you gave me collateral, but the collateral that you gave me was only worth a sela, so I owe you nothing. Patur, therefore you're exempt. Sela havisani alav ushtayim hayashava. On the other hand, because again, there the denial is complete, and so there's no mode of mixus, and as a result, you don't have to swear. But if, on the other hand, the borrower says, "Listen, I borrowed a sela from you, ushtayim hayashava, and the collateral that I gave you was worth two. V'hala omer lo ki ela sela el visani ala asicha alav. Yes, you only lent me a sela." The chamisha dinarim hayashava. But I mean, I only lent you a sela, but the collateral that you gave me was not worth two sela. It was worth 5 dinar. So all I should owe you is 1 dinar. So as a result, chayiv, you're liable to swear because that's a moda b'mikzas. Again, it highlights that the moda b'mikzas, it isn't based on who did the actual original lending and who did the actual original borrowing. It's who owes whom money now. And so as a result, in this case, the lender actually owes the borrower money because he lost the collateral that was worth more than the value of the loan. And so as a result, it's as if the lender is now the borrower, and because he's effectively making a partial admission, he's going to be subject to the oath of moda b'mikzas. Umi nishba, who swears? And we're going to see, meaning at least right now, our thought is, as Rashi tells us, kama haisa shava, who's swearing about the value of the collateral? So the answer, the Mishnah answers, misha bakadon etzlo, the person who's holding the collateral. So namely, as Rashi says, continuing on Rashi in the Mishnah, second 4 lines up from the bottom of the Rashi, Hamalva, so it's the lender, because the lender is the one who holds the collateral. Ubegamara mafarish ahaikai, and the Gemara is going to ask and explain which case this is referring to, meaning which case of the collateral is the person going to swear. Yotzi hala, okay, and then why is it that the person who has the pikadon needs to swear? Shema yeshav hazeh, because we're worried that perhaps the person who gave the collateral will swear as to its value. The yotzi hala as a pikadon, and then the other person will pull out the pikadon. So what's the wrong with the other person pulling out the pikadon? So Rashi tells us, the yotzi hala as a pikadon, the shema lo dakdek zeh b'shuma. Maybe the borrower who gave the collateral was not precise in his estimation of its value, and now that the value has come out and come clear that he misestimated the value of the item that he gave, he's going to be disqualified from testifying and from taking oaths because he will have lied in this circumstance. So Tosfos has a problem with that, because after all, why should we make some kind of takana for somebody who lies? So look at the last Tosfos on the page. Perish b'kontra shema lo diktek zeh b'shuma v'yisalenu le'edus v'shua v'came perish Rabbeinu Chananel. So again, it's quoting Rashi. Kan here, Rabbeinu Chananel kan. Aval bereish hamafkid, but in Bava Metzia, hiksha l'divrei hamefarish kain. We ask according to those who give this explanation. Do we do some kind of special decree to protect those who are wicked? And this person, even if he didn't do it on purpose, he's effectively wicked because he shouldn't swear if he's not 100% sure of what the facts are. Elataima, but rather the reason that we aren't going to let the borrower swear about the value of the collateral because Shema Yotzi Hala HaPikadon, because maybe the other person has the Pikadon, even though he says that he lost it, maybe the lender has the Pikadon, V'nimsa Shvus Lova Libatala, and it'll turn out that the borrower's oath was not necessary. So that's the concern, according to Toso. So the concern isn't about the borrower accidentally lying and being prevented from making oaths in the future and from testifying in the future. The problem is we as a court don't want to facilitate the making of an unnecessary oath. So now the Gemara is going to analyze as we turn to Mem Gimel Amud Bet. So, as Rashi just noted, the Gemara now clarifies to which case the question and answer of the Mishnah applies. So, where does it go? So, Ilay Ma'aseifa, if you're going to tell me it goes to the end case, well, that's the case, remember, where the borrower ends up claiming from the lender money because the amount of the value of the collateral was greater than the value of the loan. Well, if that's the case, the Tepuk de Shevuot Gabi Malda, we should we should always learn that we can determine who gets the oath in that situation because the oath is always made to the lender. And who is effectively the lender in this case? Now that the collateral was lost and the borrower is owed money, the borrower becomes the lender. So we don't need to ask the question in the last case of the Mishnah. So Amar Shmuel Aresha. So therefore the Shmuel says it goes to the Resha. V'chein Amar Rabbi Chia bar Rav Aresha. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yochanan Aresha. So it applies to the Resha. Well, my Resha, what do you mean by the Resha? Because obviously it can't mean the literal first case of our Mishnah, because the first case of our Mishnah was where the lender says, listen, the value of the collateral that you gave me was only worth half of the loan amount, so you owe me half of the loan, namely 1 shekel. And the borrower said, no, I gave you collateral that was worth 2 shekel, and so I owe you nothing. And there was no oath in that case. So it must mean Seifa Deresha. It must mean the second case of the first two cases. Sela Helvisicha Alav, that's the case that says the following: I lent you a Sela, v'shekel hayashava, and the collateral was worth 1 shekel. V'hala Omer Lo, ki ela Sela Helvisani Alav, yes, you lent me a Sela on my collateral, but Ushlosha Dinarim hayashava, but it was worth 3 dinars, so I only owe you 1 dinar, not a shekel. Chayav, and that was where we said that the borrower is going to be liable for swearing. So there, Deshvua Gabi Lovahi. So there, the borrower is going to be the one who swears. Vishaklua Rabbana Milova Vishaduya Amalva. And what the end of our Mishnah is saying, at least at the moment, that's the way we understand it. The end of our Mishnah is saying is that the rabbis took the oath from the borrower and put it on the lender because the lender was the one that was holding the collateral. And we don't want the lender to see the borrower swear and then bring out the collateral to try and disprove him. V'hashta to Amar of Ashi to Kaimalan Zen Nishba She'ena Bershusa V'Zen Nishba Kama Shaveh. But you know what? Actually, our whole Hava Amina of our understanding of what that last question and answer in our Mishnah is incorrect. The question and answer in our Mishnah is not about who swears about the value, as Rashi put it, of the collateral, but rather there are 2 oaths that are going to be made. There's an oath that's going to be made about that, namely that the lender has to swear that he doesn't have the collateral in his possession. And there's going to be an oath that needs to be made by the borrower about how much the collateral is worth. And this is what our Mishnah is saying. We know that there's got to be 2 oaths: an oath about that there not being the collateral, and an oath about not having the collateral, and an oath about the value of the collateral. And so, what the Mishnah is asking is, Mi nishpat tchila, who swears first? And the answer that the Mishnah gives is Mishpat Kapikadon Etzlo. The person who swears first is the one who's holding the collateral, because we want him to swear that he doesn't have the collateral. Shema Yishva Zeh the Yotzi Hala, because if the if the borrower swears first about the value of the collateral, then because the lender hasn't yet sworn that he doesn't have the collateral, he can take out the collateral and say, here it is. Don't you see that the borrower is lying? And so to prevent that, we have the lender swear first that he doesn't have the collateral, and then the borrower swears. Okay. As to the value of the collateral. So Amar Shmuel. So now we have, since our Mishnah discussed a lender who lost the collateral provided by the borrower, the Gemara cites 3 opinions regarding the ramifications of losing collateral. So Amar Shmuel, Haiman de Osve Alpha Azuze Lechavre, Umashkin Le Kata de Magla. So if I lend you $1,000 and you give me the handle of a sickle as collateral, and we'll just say that this pen is the sickle, meaning the pen is clearly not worth $1,000. As much as I like this pen, it's not worth $1,000. So but you gave me this pen as collateral. Ovid kata de magla. If I lose the sickle, Ovid alpha zuz. I've lost my 1,000 zuz, meaning that the only way I can get back my 1,000 zuz that I lent you is if I give you back the collateral that you gave me. And if I don't do it, then you don't owe me anything, according to Shmuel. So, aval tarti katate, but if you gave me 2 pens or 2 sickle handles and I lost one of them, we're not going to say that means that I lost 500. As Rashi says, aval tarti kata, it's 1, 2, from the bottom of the Rashi, it's about 15 lines up in the Rashi, end of the line, aval tarti kata, lo amrin chada kabel b'chamesh meya, v'chada b'chamesh meya. We're not going to say that the 2 sickle handles, each one is given as if it was for a $500 loan, according to Shmuel. And therefore, if I lose one of them, I don't lose $500 of the $1,000 that I was able to collect. Because you could have set it up that way. You could have said that, listen, I'm giving you 2 sickle handles. One sickle handle is a collateral for $500, and the other sickle handle is collateral for $500, but you didn't do that. You gave me 2 sickle handles as an aggregate of collateral for the entire loan. So elatar vayu kablinhu b'chada. But rather, both of them were accepted together as one. B'mashkono, as a mashkon, as a collateral. V'lo b'para own, and not as any kind of payment. B'kevan de mahadar le mixus mashkono. And so now, even though I lost one of the that I was able to give you back one handle, that I gave you back one handle, and yes, I lost the handle, but the handle's worth $1. So as a result, you still owe me $999. Even though if I had lost both handles, according to Shmuel, I would lose the entire $1,000. Thankfully, I only lost one. Okay, so that is position number 1. Rav Nachman Amar, no, afilu tarti katate. Even if in the case of the 2 handles, we're going to say automatically, by implication, no need to specify that, in fact, if you say that you're giving me 2 handles as collateral, each of those handles is considered a collateral for half of the loan. And so if I lose one of them, avid chada, avid chamesh meya. If I lose one, I lose 500. Avid idach, avid kulei. And if I lose the other, I lose the rest. Aval kata v'naska. However, where does Rav Nachman agree with Shmuel is if the 2 pieces of collateral are very different. If you give me a bar of silver, an ingot of silver, a naska is an ingot. So if you give me an ingot and you give me a handle, well, then we're not going to treat them each as being subject to $500 of collateral. As Rashi says, 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi, aval kata v'naska, lo amrinan naska kabel b'palga. We don't say that the ingot ends up being worth half of a collateral for half. Because an ingot is something that you could actually use to pay me, who lo kablei alav aleha el b'midi shavio. You are only going to get its value. So the principles that Reb Nachman highlight are the following: if you give me collateral that is just that is not cannot constitute as payment, well then each piece is going to be a proportional amount of each piece of collateral is going to be a proportional amount of the overall loan and account for the overall loan. But if you give me something that is actually could be used as payment, well then that is really just, we're going to assume that the meeting of the minds over the conveyance of that piece of collateral is that is collateral for the value that's associated with it and not for a proportional amount of the total amount. But Nahardai Amar, Amrei, the Nahardayans say, they go one step further than Reb Nachman, and they say even Afilu Kata v'Naska, even the Kata and Naska's case, even in that case, Avid Naska, Avid Palga, Avid Kata, Avid Kule. Basically, it doesn't make a difference what you use as collateral. And you count the number of pieces of collateral. And if you have two pieces of collateral, then losing each of them is like losing half of the loan. If you have four pieces of collateral, losing each of them is like a quarter of the loan, etc., etc. So that now you are probably thinking to yourself, I don't understand, because our Mishnah specifically said that that in the second case of the Mishnah, or I guess the first case of the Mishnah too, that the lender lost the collateral and was claiming the difference between the value of the collateral and the amount of the loan. But I don't understand. Shmuel, who is the most pro lender of all three opinions that we just quoted, says that if the lender loses the collateral, and there's only one thing of collateral, and here that's the case that we're dealing with in our Mishnah, the lender has lost the collateral. So where in the world you don't get to collect anything, according to Shmuel? So I don't understand. How can you enable that? Well, that is exactly what the question that the Gemara is going to ask right now. How is it that these opinions can say that losing collateral causes a loss for the lender that is larger than the value of the collateral? Our Mishnah says that that's not true. So, but for that question and the answer, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Shabbat Shalom. I'll note that Eli has already recorded the sessions for Shabbos and Sunday, so keep an eye out for the recordings in HIR's daily emails. You won't want to miss that answer that you will get, God willing, tomorrow. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.